friends. Welcome back to another musical moment in the life of the old-time rock and roller. Today, I am with a special friend of mine. 23 years we've been working, collaborating, playing music. It's just been a blast. This guy, Mr., and I know real names, but Blackjack Ketchum at WRFG, 100,000 watts of blues power, 40 hours a week. Doug and his wife have two-hour shows apiece, The Blues Train and AJ's Kitchen. So without further ado, here's Blackjack. How are you doing, brother?
Hey, every day above ground is a great one, Forrest. You know that. And,
I do.
Happy to be here today. Hard to believe that we've been hanging out together since 1998. Man, I know it's kind of a cliche, but time sure zips by pretty fast these days. But we're still here.
Yeah.
We're still doing the blues. You're still doing your great performances and music. And I'm still on the air at WRFG 89.3 FM and streaming live at WRFG.org.
You know, if I didn't know better, I'd say you had a radio voice.
I've been told that before, but hard for me to really comprehend that because I've had this since I was about 14. And truth be told, though, Forrest, I had a radio show back in the 60s when I was in high school. The way I used to do it back then, I'd record it on reel-to-reel, no editing, no razor blades, no tape. It was just straightforward with it. And I drop it off at our local FM station in downtown Kenosha, Wisconsin. And then I would journey on and do my job on Saturdays, which was teaching swimming lessons at the local Y. So I never really got to hear myself on the air, but AJ used to listen to me back then. We went to the same high school, lived in the same city, obviously. And it was all blues and the rock and roll scene back then. I had a cousin who lived out in the San Francisco area. She used to turn me on to bands like Moby Grape, you know, things that,
hey, Grandma,
who would ever hear of them in Wisconsin back then in the 1960s, you know? So I got a lot of good music from her telling me, and her husband was also a musician, regional, you know, and he had a band. So I had some unique things going on, and I did a little bit of radio when I was going to college, but primarily it's been with WRFG.
Right. So tell me about when we first met in 1998. What was going on?
I can't remember that far back. No, we were brand new to the Tuesday time slot, which we've been doing now, 6 to 8 a.m. for me Eastern time. AJ does 8 to 10 a.m. And when we started out, it was to temporarily substitute for an air shifter who had, let's say, stepped outside the boundaries of the policies and guidelines for Radio Free Georgia. So he got a 30-day vacation. And I had been volunteering for 2 years at the station. It is a volunteer-run station. We've got over 100 volunteers. And I was subbing for any genre that I could for 2 years. Jazz, bluegrass, soul, R&B, obviously blues. And one day I got a phone call from the station manager, and she said, how would you like to try out the Tuesday time slot from 6 to 8 a.m.? I said, great, I would love to do it. I was raring to go. And I said, AJ, you've got to come with me into the studio to answer the phones, because I hadn't been doing it full time. So I wanted to really focus on running the board. And the way I do radio, well, not these days, and we can get into that, but back then I had the product with me. I had the media. It was vinyl, cassette tape, CDs, you know. So my thrill came from managing everything live on the air, getting the segues as tight as possible. And for the most part, it was ad lib, you know. I mean, I had a playlist with me. I always had a roadmap. And I just loved it. And I said, all you have to do is answer the phones. And she said, I don't want to get on the mic. That's not anything I really want to do. Yeah. You saw how long that lasted. We have been a team on WRFG on Tuesday mornings from 6 to 10 a.m. since 1998, September of 98. And that year, we were working the WRFG annual Labor Day Blues BBQ. Was over at the Waterworks, and we were selling tickets for the beer tent. You had to have a ticket. You couldn't use cash. And started a lot of conversations and friendships through the blues, the music, and fundraising events like that. And that's how you and I met. And while it's on my mind, thank you very much for everything you and your band have done for WRFG over the last, 24 years? Is that how long it's been? I guess so.
23, yeah.
Yeah, 23.
Our
So,
pleasure.
yeah. And ours too, because it all helps. We are a listener funded station. We are a not-for-profit entity, 501c3. I'm a volunteer. AJ's a volunteer. So it's an avocation, certainly. And it makes me feel good to be able to say that I'm helping to keep the blues alive worldwide now that we're streaming. And the shows are archived on the website now. So that's something new. If you don't get up early in the morning to listen to it live, a couple days after each broadcast, you can go to the website, click on the menu, drop down menu, archives, bingo. And you just scroll through all of that.
That's great. You know, I remember that day that we met and we were talking and you mentioned how much you love the blues and the radio. And you remarked, boy, wouldn't it be great to turn an avocation into a vocation one day?
Yeah, well, I was never able to really do that. I had a full-time career. I've had several of those through the decades, but I managed to juggle it all.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the CD covers that you really were instrumental in, because you took the cover photo for What's It Gonna Take and chose the layout there. Although I did see the lottery sign where it said play here and came up with the idea to list all of the songs there. That was great. But, yeah. And the Finger Licking Blues, I don't want to steal your thunder. Go ahead.
Well, Spirit of the Blues was, I think, your first blues album. Right. You had done a lot of rock and roll before that, which are great albums too. And you played that hot lead guitar lick for Bob Seger. What was the name of that song that almost made it into the top 40 that got you a gold record?
It's actually Old Time Rock and Roll, and I've got 3 platinums behind me.
Platinums, that's right. Well, it's been a while now. Yeah, they've actually gone platinum. Well, anyway,
yeah.
Part of my career, if you will, part of my profession at the time, I was a communication consultant for a large human resource benefit communication consulting firm. And so I got to have all the fun. You know, I was pretty well versed in photography, videography, filmmaking, print media, and worked with several different graphic artists at the time, some of them freelance, some of them part of the company. So we started talking, you know, and I started hanging out at your gigs around the various blues clubs here in Atlanta. And you said, you know, I'm coming up with a new album, and you already had the name picked out. What's it going to take? You know, and by the way, Van Morrison just copped that name for his latest album.
Whoa. My old bass player plays with Van, so David Hayes. So maybe I'll send him a copy to give to Van and say, hey, Dave, you know, the last time you and I saw each other was in Cotati, California at Prairie Sun when we were recording this album, and you went on our dinner break with us.
Yeah, I'm sure Van would appreciate that. So anyway, I was thrilled that you asked me to help with the album, and I looked at it as an opportunity to do something really creative, because in the business world there were confinements on that. You know, there were certain walls that you didn't break down, although I did push the envelope quite a bit. So I got to use my photography skills. I used to be an English instructor, creative writing and, you know, that kind of thing. So I got to use my writing skills. I wrote the liner notes, proofread everything, and got to hire a graphic designer to help with everything and art direct. And it was just phenomenal for me, because it was something that you and I were doing based on your creative talents and mine. And, you know, you get a combination like that, and it just all came together. Went down to the railroad yards here in Atlanta, and that's Forrest right there. With the got to have trains, right, when you're singing about the blues. And you even had a special guest on the album.
Yeah, James Montgomery and Roy Gaines, blues man
Yes.
for life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to meet James several times. The last time I saw him, this tells you how long ago it was, he was with Johnny Winter, and he was the harmonica player and really a caretaker for Johnny, and really helped with his health care and got him back into a healthy state. And they were on the road. I saw them here at the Variety Playhouse in Atlanta when they passed through. So anyway, it was a great album, a lot of great blues songs on there. And you did a combination of classics that influenced you, music that always will always be there, and then originals as well. And like I said, you know, great. Look at that. I don't know if they can see that.
Play here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the Georgia lottery, and it was the different games they had. I said,
right,
Blackjack, take this picture with me right here with it, and I'll put the song titles in there, and it worked beautifully.
Yeah. We had fun, right? And that's what it's all about, you know. The blues is a lot of fun. Believe it or not, for those of you that are new to the genre, it's an uplifting type of music. It really is. It grabs your soul, grabs your psyche. It can make goosebumps, you know, and that's my passion, obviously. I mean, I've been doing this for quite a while now. In fact, I had blues records, 78 RPMs, that I used to borrow from my dad's collection back in the early 50s when he was at work, you know. So Big Joe Turner, you know, that kind of thing. It
fabulous stuff.
Yeah.
So, my dad too. So, you know, it really helps to have a hip dad who's got a great record collection.
Yeah. Yep. You know, that was back in the days. He'd come home, stack up a bunch of 78s on the spindle on the old turntable, which wasn't stereo. It was hi-fi. Yeah.
Hi-fi.
And then you hear these big 78 RPM records slamming down on top of each other, and just great tunes coming out after that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in 1999, we released Spirit of the Blues. 2000, What's It Gonna Take? And I was all fired up and said, we got to do another one. And actually, a guitar player friend of mine who says that I taught him everything he knew, Mr. Johnny Barnes up in New England. I sent him a copy and he said, geez, why didn't you just, you know, call it a jazz album or something? You know, I don't hear a lot of guitar on there, even though I played a couple of incredible solos like on Alligator. So that
was a great song, by the way. It still is. I mean, I still go back and play that music, you know, over 20 years old. So it was all great stuff, Forrest.
Thank you. So I thought, all right, I'm going to do a guitar album. and Finger Licking Blues was it. I said, I'm going to play my ass off on this thing. And you came out to my garage. I had the Les Paul.
Yeah. Yep. Finger Licking Blues. That's it right there. And those are Raymond Victor's hands on the keyboards.
Yep.
And
what a combination on that.
You are playing a Les Paul there, right?
Right.
Yeah. Finger Licking Blues. That's a great title.
It is. You came up with that, I believe.
And then and there's the man in action himself. Look at that. Beautiful shot. Great album. Great music, as always. And you've won awards for these albums too.
Let's see. I don't know where half this stuff is because after the flood, I never really unpacked everything. But sorry. As I'm looking around and I'm looking for stuff that's blue in here. But
I got my blue shirt on.
Yeah. We won Blues CD of the year for Finger Licking Blues, and we won Blues Song of the Year for Work off of What's It Gonna Take?
Yeah.
And this was the Just Plain Folks Independent Music Awards, and they had over 65,000 entries. Anybody could enter, and somebody might say, oh yeah, but it's probably Joey's Garage Band. No, when I won a third one of these for the Colorblind album, Blues Song of the Year, going back to Memphis, and that beat out Gatemouth Brown, who was one of the 5 finalists. So wow. I don't want to hear anybody say it was, a Mickey Mouse organization, because Brian Whitney puts on a heck of a contest. He did for years. So
and I think as a result of some of those pioneers at the time, which also included what was called the W.C. Handy Awards, all of a sudden now look how many different organizations we have that have these kinds of programs where they award various categories to blues musicians and albums. There's just a plethora of these things now, where back then there were only a handful, if even that. By the way, while it's on my mind, since you brought up the flood that you experienced a while ago, I want to let our viewers know that you and I are doing this shortly after the hurricane in Florida, Ian, and a lot of devastation and damage down there. And as you know, Florida is a hot spot for the blues, and there are a lot of blues musicians down there. And they are now getting slammed after the pandemic and the lockdown, when touring and live performances weren't the commonplace thing. And, people like Janova Magnus wasn't sure if she could get back in the studio and even record an album, that self-doubt, that uncertainty. Of course, she has a new album out, and it is really dynamite. But for those of you out there who can support the blues musicians in Florida, buying a CD, a t-shirt, whatever it is, to help out, they would really appreciate it. Some of them lost their homes, gone. Anyway,
Barry Oakley,
Barry, yeah.
He lost his. And also, just what you said reminded me, 1999, 2000, 2001, 3 years in a row, Real Blues Magazine voted us the best Southern rock blues band. So,
yep. It's been a good ride, and it's still going.
Oh yeah. Do you remember the second Atlanta Blues Festival?
Yep, I sure do.
You Definitely. And AJ were the MCs for that.
Yeah, we have done quite a bit of MCing over the years. For a while, for 4 years running, I also did the MC on the music stage for the Big Green Egg annual celebration. called Eggtoberfest. Big Green Eggs corporate headquarters is here in Atlanta. And one of the individuals, Bob Atkinson, who's one of the head guys in the sales and marketing department, was still living out of state at the time. And he'd come into Atlanta periodically, and being an astute person that he is, and a guy who likes blues, checked out the left end of the radio dial when he was commuting here, discovered WRFG, and called in during one of our fund drives that we have to raise money. And that's how we got our synergy going. And when he called into the studio, George Klein, the president, co-president of the Atlanta Blues Society, was in the studio with us, answering phones and filling out the pledge forms for folks who were making gifts and contributions. And so the three of us really worked very hard to make a couple of, several ABS, Atlanta Blues Society events bigger than they were. They always donate a big green egg. And he's also been the corporate representative that has sponsored a lot of things at WRFG, both financially and giving us, donating big green eggs that we raffle off now at the Blues Barbecue every Labor Day. So a lot of team building, a lot of good people. You know, that's the one thing that I'm very grateful for. The radio show and those kinds of events where I've gone out and emceed, whether it's the Atlanta Blues Challenge or whether it's been the Atlanta Blues Festivals, whatever it is, I meet great people, you know, and lasting friendships, you know, that very, very tight bonds. So
super. Yeah. We did that show at the Masquerade. I know we came on after Francine Reed, just before Leon Russel.
Yeah.
That was, we finally released the Colorblind album, and I think it took a couple of years actually, because I was flying to Germany and Mallorca to work with Tony Carey to do some great post-production work. Tony just did an unbelievable job on that. He said, okay, play me a solo, no gratuitous notes. Every note has to count for something. So when I see these people on these reels that go along on Instagram or TikTok, and you know, they play 40,000 notes in a second and it ends, and you think, wow, well, that was a lot of finger moving, but I don't feel anything, you know. So you know, Tony really re-emphasized that, stressing the hook even in your solo, make it a hook solo kind of thing.
It isn't always how many notes you can play and how fast you play them. And I'm not a musician, you know, it's a subliminal thing with me. I don't have the technical knowledge. It's what's between the notes oftentimes. Mm-hmm. And as the Allman Brothers used to say, the musicians in the band have a unique language among the band members. And when it's the time when you are hitting the note and you're in that groove, you got one foot in the groove and off you go, and the audience goes right along with you when you have found a way to hit the note. So
yeah, it's incredible. So we did Riding on the Blues Train on that 2006 release of Colorblind, 2004, and you opened up your show with that.
Well, there were a couple of versions of that. Later on, you remixed it and added Becky Wright at the front end
on the Stand My Ground CD.
Right, and I've been using that to open my show for years, even though the song was created. I don't know what the inspiration was, but boy, it sure fit the format of my show because it's called Riding the Blues Train.
All right.
And it's just a great way to start. And it lets the listeners know that it's me in the studio. You know, this is my show that's starting now, because there are times when we have substitutes, you know, when other responsibilities and duties call, and we couldn't be there. And so it's a good signature piece. It's a great signature piece.
Yeah.
And I still get a thrill listening to it. You've got Andrew Black doing some of the vocals. You got Raymond Victor. I think maybe John McKnight on drums, and John Schwenke on bass.
Yep.
And they were known at one time as the Quarter Ton Rhythm Section here in town. Big guys, in shape, not.
I don't know if I told you this story. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but when we played up at the King Biscuit Blues Festival, and I was driving back to the hotel, Ray and Dave Parnell stayed there, and Schwenke and McKnight, Quarter Ton, were with me. So they're sitting on the seat in the back, and the next thing I hear a little, cut it out, quit it, I've got a really bad headache. And the next thing I see is Schwenke and McKnight are wrestling like the Royal Rumble, and because John, man, he had a headache, and McKnight was poking him and like, don't do it.
Just like kids on a summer vacation road trip with their parents, really.
Right? And so they finally calmed down, and Schwenke said, "Now just quit it, don't do it." So okay, so about 2 minutes went by, and McKnight couldn't stand it, and he poked him again, and John grabbed him and put him in a bear hug, and then a headlock, and he wouldn't let him go, and finally said, okay, McKnight, I won't do it again. But
that story triggers a unique experience that I had. For 6 months, I was self-employed, had a contract gig in New Jersey. And what that meant for me was every Tuesday morning after I finished the broadcast, drive to the airport, hop on a plane. I'd be in Jersey through Friday or Saturday, come back to Atlanta, organize my show, do the show, boom, back there. Well, the Muddy Waters Tribute Band formed back then. This was 1999. And, Bob Margolin, Pine Top Perkins, Calvin Fuzz Jones, Jerry Portnoy, all these great guys. And I was able to get a backstage pass, arranged through Bob to do an interview with the whole band, and got into the dressing room, was there while they were eating supper, which was Chinese. It was brought in. Great big dressing room. It was in a little theater. Don't even remember the city in Jersey. It was, about the size of the Variety Playhouse, might be a capacity of a couple thousand. And it was phenomenal. I mean, I was there for the sound check, and Jerry Portnoy led that. And he was like the band leader, the music director. Mm-hmm. Amazing to be standing on stage with these guys. Muddy Waters was the first blues band I saw. My hometown is halfway between Milwaukee and Chicago. So I got to go down to the lakefront. There was Muddy. This was like 68 or 69, summertime. And Michael Bloomfield and Paul Butterfield were part of the group. This was the Fathers and Sons era, album. And Buddy Miles came out and played drums for Got My Mojo Working. But anyway, here I am on stage watching these guys get it together to make sure they're all in sync before the show. I started crying,
So heavy. Wow.
Couldn't believe it. So we're in the dressing room, and at that time Bob Margolin was a little bit bigger than he is now, right? And he and Pine Top were very close, very, very tight friends. They're eating, and then when they're done eating, I'm getting them to do drops and spots and promos for the show. And this lull kind of set over the whole group there, and we're just relaxing and sitting back, letting that Chinese food work its way through our systems. And all of a sudden, Pine Top, who was at that time probably 80 something, leaps to his feet, flies through the air, and jumps on top of Bob Margolin, and they start wrestling. Little skinny Pine Top, and it was just hilarious. I mean, it was like this burst of joy. You know, we're about ready to go out on stage. We're gonna really do good blues, good Chicago blues, Muddy Waters. We all played with Muddy. You know, these guys, they're all pumped up, and there's Pine Top going, yeah, watch this. Boom.
Funny.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I got off track. Gee,
no, it's a great story and a great experience for you.
great times.
In 2019, I released Blues in a Bucket, and that record did really well. It was on the charts in one part of the country, another for 6 months. And I know we were #2 at the radio station, maybe #1 for a week, back and forth. You gave us a lot of support on that record. I appreciate that.
Of course, yeah. And not only me, but a lot of the other WRFG air shifters also spun that CD many times, especially Sydney, the
Yes.
gatekeeper, who opens it up on Monday. She's a big fan.
I love her. She's Marian.
Yep, Marian.
Rich
Marian, you know,
Marian,
I was going to say, Marian has since retired.
I
And
know that.
Frankie Robinson from Frankie's Blues Mission is now doing that time slot. So,
Okay.
and he was our honoree at the Labor Day Blues Barbecue this past September.
Nice. Nice. So there's been a lot of great air shifters over the last 2 decades there, or plus. You know,
Yep.
I recall when I first got turned on to WRFG, I heard about the station and I mailed in a CD to Sista Blue. And I didn't think anything would come of it. And then I forgot about it. And then one morning I was driving into downtown and surfing on the radio. And, you know, it gives you like 4 seconds, 3 seconds, and moves to the next station. And I got to one and I heard, wow, that's a great guitar solo. What is this? And then
Sound familiar?
I came back in with Hard to Lose. I said, oh, that's me.
How does that feel when you hear your songs being played over a radio station?
It's really thrilling the first times you hear it. I mean, you know, it's every kid's dream that ever picked up a guitar.
Yeah.
I went up to Rhode Island to visit my brother Steve when he was still with us. And Bill Narkowitz does the Tuesday night and another blues show at WMVY in Martha's Vineyard. And it was New Blues Hour, and he featured, it was probably Stand My Ground at the time. But I sat there with my brother Steve, and he, you know, he heard the guy talking to me over the air and like that. It was a real big thrill for him to vicariously live that, you know.
Yeah, that's great, you know. And now, you know, radio, I guess in a way, might be a dwindling medium as far as head count for the audiences go, because there are so many different options out there now, all these streaming services. Plus, people really get into doing what I enjoy doing, making your own playlist. And, you know, they've got their smartphone with them and the earbuds, and off they go.
Yeah.
The good thing about the radio stations are those that evolve to that point where, like us, we have a live stream so you can listen in real time, and you've got shows archived now too. So, you know, we're trying to keep up with the podcasts and the streaming services the best that we can.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like real radio. You know, it's you and I think back to, you know, the 50s and the 60s, you know, flipping that FM station on and hearing Roy Orbison do Pretty Woman or Crying. You know, some of those great songs that were out back then.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
yeah. So listen, I know you've got a couple of good stories Like,
Think-
how about let's go with the Jimi Hendrix story. Why don't you tell the fans?
Man, this one's going to take a little bit of time. We have a lot of great guitar players here in the Atlanta area, and you used to live here, and I was always searching for something different, something unique to do on my show. Jimi Hendrix Experience was the first rock and roll concert I ever went to. It was December of 1968 in Chicago. And I was a journalist with our school newspaper at the time, doing music reviews, feature stories. Writing has always been a part of the fabric of who Blackjack is. And got to go down there. I snuck a tape recorder in. Was a reel-to-reel tape recorder hidden under my coat on a belt, and of course I had my grandfather's fedora with the top punched out, the crown punched out, so it was all big and round and agate, because it was Hendrix. So flash forward to the radio show. I got this CD. It's called Variations on the Theme, Red House. And it's the Hendrix Reference Library. I've never seen another Hendrix Reference Library CD, but this one has 7 different versions of Red House on it. 6 of them done by Jimi Hendrix. There's the studio version, which first appeared on the English version, the British version of Are You Experienced. Wasn't released here in the States yet. The only way you could get it was by cutting out a coupon on the paper sleeve for a Warner Brothers 2-record set of the best of their stable of talent, mail it in, and you got this 2-record set, and Red House was on there. Anyway, one of the versions is done by John Lee Hooker. So I thought, I've got 6 different versions of Red House, Hendrix, and live, except for the studio version, obviously. Like any great musician, every time you play a song, you play it differently, depending on the vibe of the audience, the band, what's going on. And I thought, I think I'm going to have 6 guitar players that are well known here come in, bring their axe, bring their amp, because there's a booklet that goes with this. That explains everything in technical terms. Well, people like me don't you have to be an electronic engineer along with a musician if you play guitar. The tubes, the amps, the wiring, the pickups, the humbuckers, you get. I said, we need to boil it down to layman's terms as to what the techniques are that Hendrix is using on one of the greatest blues songs, still one of my favorites, Red House. And of course, you were one of those guests that, came in. So being a very detail-oriented person like you are, and the requirement that I had to record my show, you got a copy of it. You sat down and transcribed our interview and the layman's terms explanation as to what Hendrix was doing on whatever version of Red House I played that day. And you broke it down into its components. So I go back to the office, and I can't remember exactly what year that was, but I think I was, as we say, self-employed at the time. And I get this email, because you put it out on your website, or maybe it was, what were some of those websites back then prior to Facebook?
It was AOL,
MySpace.
MySpace, and AOL actually had a.
Yeah. Okay. So you put the whole interview up there. And of course, we both talked about our personal experiences with Jimi Hendrix. I get this email. Are you Blackjack? And of course, being the smart aleck that I am, I said, well, that depends on who you are. I wrote back. And he said, do you do a radio show in Atlanta? I said, yes, I do. Did you recently interview Forrest McDonald? Maybe. You know, I mean, I'm not giving away. I don't know who these people are.
Who's asking?
Yeah, exactly. And he says, did you see Jimi Hendrix twice? I said, yes, I did. Did you see him in Madison, Wisconsin on May 2nd, 1970 and record that show? Because we had talked about it on the air.
Yeah.
And that was the second time, last time, obviously, because he died shortly after that. Did you record that show? And I had done it on a Sears Silvertone portable cassette deck. And I said, yeah, I did. You know, I caved in and started answering everything straightforward. And he said, did you get the whole show without interruption of any of the songs? I said, yeah. And I said, the only weak part in the whole recording is for a brief period of time, I sang along with Red House. And he said, can we have a copy of that tape, of that recording? I said, no, absolutely not. Why? He says, well, we make bootleg albums, not to sell, because that's what I was worried about. You know, we don't sell them. It was a spokesman, let's say, for this fan base group, Fanatics. You know, the word fan comes from fanatics. And it was a worldwide network of Hendrix fans whose primary goal was to collect and catalog every recording that Hendrix ever did, both live performances, studio recordings, and every different take of those studio recordings. How they did this, I don't know. And I said, I'm not going to send my tape to you. Well, make a duplicate. Well, what I didn't tell him is that every time I popped the Sears cassette tape into my Sony tape deck and tried to dupe it, it would go at like twice as fast as it was supposed to. I couldn't control, you know, and I don't, you know, it was the very first iteration of surround sound. This was back about, must have been early 2000s, maybe, when we did this show.
Yeah.
So somehow I found someone who could control all of that. I don't know why it always played that way on my system. Got a good recording of it. And I said, okay, I have a duplicate. Why do you want it? And they said, well, here's what happened. They said, the night before in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Hendrix did his concert there and he was off. He had a bad day, a bad night. And he was extremely disappointed in his performance. And he made a vow, and these guys knew about this, that the next night at the next gig, when he was in Madison, Wisconsin, he was going to blow the doors off the Dane County Memorial Coliseum. He did. And they wanted to preserve that and put it out with their, you know, group of recordings for free. Yeah, they didn't charge for them. And they couldn't find anybody who had the entire concert without interruption. You know, and I had a cigarette lighter with me, and you know, I was watching the tape, and I waited until there was some banter going on between Jimi and the guys in the band and the audience. You know, perfect time. It was a 90-minute tape. Boom, flipped that thing, got it. You know, and Machine Gun was the very next song after I flipped the tape over to the B side. And I said, well, I don't know. I said, I don't know if I should really get involved with this. And that's when they told me they had this network of, I don't know how many people, hundreds maybe, around the world. And these people had all these CDs. And you know, when you order a bunch of CDs, you get a box, a long, narrow box, you know, that's over a foot long, crammed. That's how they paid me for letting them dupe it. they sent me a box, like, well, it wasn't really in a box. By the time I got all these CDs, they're coming in from all over the world. Austria, Germany, Australia, Japan, Europe, Britain, Canada. All these people that were part of this network paid me with every recording they have. And I've got Jimi Hendrix sitting in the studio working on Electric Ladyland, flipping the pages in his spiral notebook where he wrote his lyrics, reminding himself how the song went, sitting there with his Fender Strat on a stool. You can just see this, practicing 1983, a Moon Man, I should turn the tides away. Whoa, so I said, oh, okay. So the bottom line is my tape was made into a 2 CD set from their group, and it's called Madison Blues. So if you can find that CD out there surfing the net, that's my recording. And anyway, so that was quite the experience, it's literally pun intended. Yeah.
Man, that's a great story. And I feel good knowing that I helped contribute to the worldwide Hendrix Legacy Library. So
yeah. It was and it was a great show. For years and years, people would come up to me and ask about that show. Did you record it? Yes, I did. May I have a copy? No, no. It's just, one of those things.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that was a great show for you to be at, I'll tell you.
Yeah. It's just one of the many things, one of the events, one of the experiences that will be with me forever, and it's been a great run. I've got to hang out with people like Honey Boy Edwards, Buddy Guy, BB King, Taj Mahal, John Hammond, most of the guys that have played with Muddy on and off through the years. Rory Block, my favorite acoustic blues performer. Tinsley Ellis, another great Atlanta blues rock guitarist, performer, still on tour, still putting out great CDs on Alligator. And AJ and I went to Music Midtown before we were on the air and involved with WRFG. And the primary reason we went to that, we wanted to see 2 people, Francine Reed and Tinsley Ellis. And we were right there, and later on here, 25 years later, Tinsley and I are still teaming up. I usually serve as MC and do the introductions for his gigs when he's here in town. So
nice. And Walter Trout for a while was coming through. And
oh yeah, Walter Trout. I spent my 50th birthday with him at Chips up in Winder. It was a private event, and that was pretty cool. I think he and I might be the same age, and boy, he has a great story. I mean, he was on death's doorstep, before he got his liver transplant. And his wife, Marie, has written a book. I think it was her thesis or her dissertation. I'm blanking out here which one is for a PhD. But she wrote this journal almost daily about what they were going through trying to get a liver transplant. Once it finally happened, Walter was in such bad shape. Fortunately, everything worked out. He had to relearn how to play guitar. I mean, because he was gone, really, and came back. He's got a couple of new albums since then, and going on tour, and he's full of energy, full of life, and still doing the blues.
That's great. Hey, why don't we wrap it up with you telling about your visit to San Francisco, and my old keyboard player, Raymond Victor, who lives in the Bay Area. And I tipped him off that you were coming, made sure you guys were hooked up, and you take it from there.
For those of you who are tuning in to Forrest's YouTube channel here, if you don't have, but I'm sure you do, his early CDs, you know who Raymond Victor is. I think he was originally from Chicago, played keyboards with the band, and was the vocalist for many, many years. Just a character and a great blues voice, very gravelly, very soulful, and spiritual at the same time, like the old time gospel songs, all blended in. And I really love that iteration of the Forrest McDonald band. So I was trying to get some business with the state of California, for the day job, and had to go out to Sacramento. And after that was over, I made my way down to Vallejo, right? That's where he lives, somewhere in there, right? Mm-hmm. Which is near San Francisco. Only the locals don't call it San Francisco, they call it the city. Yeah. So I stayed overnight with Raymond, had a nice meal, home cooked meal. And he said, let's go into the city. I said, great, because we were going to go to, I think the Warehouse, some of these famous blues places. Plus, after it was all over, we wanted to go to Chinatown. He wanted to show me, some of the neat things about San Francisco. So I had a rental car. I drove. We're going across the Golden Gate Bridge eventually. But anyway, prior to that, we're cruising in toward the city. We're still on the other side of the bay. And he says, pull into that bar over there. Okay. What? Get in there. We walk in, just like two guys usually do, go up to the bar, sit down. And Raymond's very friendly, obviously kind of sort of knows the bartender. And I used to be a bartender. I did that for 3 years. This bartender sets 2 shot glasses down in front of us, right? I didn't know what that meant. We didn't do that in Kenosha. I don't know what that was. So the reason he was doing that was because at every one of these bars, after we had one drink, Raymond would get up, and each of these little clubs, and they were just holes in the wall, had a piano. And he'd walk over to the piano and sit down and just start rocking the house. Well, the drinks were free from that point on. That's what the upside down shot glasses indicated. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. We stopped at about 5 of those clubs before we even got into the city that night. And that was a unique experience. Yeah. And I'm there with Raymond, my buddy that I met through you and through the band. And, we had stories and adventures, here in town. Here I am on the left coast, and and then we go into town, and all these great bands that we were, walking into these clubs, and everybody knew Raymond, hey, Raymond. And then we actually made it down to Chinatown, and the place where he took me to eat after hours was where all the proprietors of the other Chinese restaurants went to eat when they closed their restaurants for the night. One of the places where there's live fish and, lobsters and things in these tanks. And I want that, so pretty good time with Mr. Raymond Victor.
Yeah.
Vocalist extraordinaire.
Yeah. He's a character. We were talking, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, and he said, how can we record it together on the internet? I said, well, maybe I'd probably have to do the track and then mail it to you, and you'd have to put your part on it, bring it back. Because
a lot of albums are actually done that way now, as you well know.
Yeah, I've got a friend, Valerie Lunishkin, from Perth, Russia. And I've played a solo on one song of his last 3 albums, and he's done 1 or 2 for me. So we just mailed the track across the pond.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yep.
So it would be nice to have one more Raymond Victor Forrest McDonald record for sure.
Certainly would. That was a great team. Hey, speaking of the old days, do you
Yeah.
still have Baby?
Do I still have babies?
Baby. Dave Parnell's saxophone.
Oh yeah. You know, I bought that sax for Dave, and he was going to pay me back, you know, $40 a month or something.
Yeah.
And he never paid anything on it. But when we were going out there to the Vallejo Jazz and Blues Fest, or I know it was oh man, Bluesapalooza. And Dave had the heart attack on the plane, so I took the horn, and it was in my house sitting here for 12 years. I hadn't opened it, and I said to Kaylin, "Take a picture of me playing the horn when I get it out." And I got it out, and I started playing, and she took 2 pictures. And when we had it developed, there were these gold, like, you know, if you do a sparkler at night and you see that kind of thing, well, it was,
Trailers.
yeah,
Trails.
all
Yeah.
of this gold, like spirit shit, was coming out of the horn. I mean, it was freaky. It was like, whoa, you know, part of Dave was still in the horn. And
Sure. And, you know, since you don't have the horn right here with us now, for our viewers, it was a black saxophone with gold trim on it, right? It was a beautiful instrument. So,
you know, I'm a big Benny Goodman fan and big band and swing fan. So it reminded me of one of those horns back then. We went into the store and I saw it. I said, "Man, that's it." He said, "No, that was toothpick. That's it."
you know, AJ used to play saxophone
Is that
way
right?
back when. Yeah, back, geez, probably the 60s. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, when we first met intimately, rather than just high school classmates, she would get her guitar out and serenade me back in the old days, you know. And
Oh,
back then it was mostly Stevie Nicks songs, I think.
yeah. Still,
Yeah.
she's very talented.
Oh yeah, and very artistic too. She's a great artist and a good designer. You know, we've been renovating our house, turning it into something, you know, that really reflects who we are.
Yeah.
And she's been extremely instrumental in creating that look. We've been in this house since 1987, so it was long overdue.
Well, I love her, and you got a good one there. So
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
number one.
Man, I want to thank you for 30 plus years of friendship and partnership and collaboration. And I just hope it keeps on, brother.
We're still here. We're still kicking. And
Well,
nowadays, we're not back in the studio at this point in time at WRFG. So I've become a production engineer. I'm going back to my graduate school degree. And, you know, it's all kind of the same concept. And it's what I did for years and years as a communication consultant. So AJ and I and a lot of the other air shifters at Radio Free Georgia are producing our shows at home. Some of them have real sophisticated studio setups, you know, and some of us use Audacity. And I had to build a digital library. And it was Sydney, the gatekeeper from WRFG, who gave me a few tips to get me going on how to use, you know, the Audacity program. And I was off and flying after about 3-4 weeks. And,
good.
you know, great way, because, you know, you can take out every mistake, every errant breath that you make, you know, like when, you know, it sounds like you got asthma or something. Cut that out, you know, sound a lot more professional. You know?
I do that a lot in post-production, man.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll edit this and make me sound better than I do.
I just did one with my songwriting buddy, Lawrence Proman. He's down in Guatemala, and we had the time delay on the vocal. So I'll be busy on that one. Much more than this one. You're a professional, Blackjack.
Well, thank you.
This was a great interview, very smooth. I'm sure all of the YouTube fans and followers will really dig it. And I just want to say, keep love in your heart, a song in your head, and I will see you down the musical highway on the next music moment with the old time rock and roller. Thanks again, Doug.
You bet. That's great. I appreciate the opportunity. Make sure you put a link on my Facebook page.
Oh, I sure will. Absolutely.
Even I, an amateur, really, have over 1,000 people who watch me on Facebook, whatever it is that I do. Mostly just put up music and interesting photographs. You know,
well, hopefully
old people love Facebook.
Hopefully they'll listen to the whole 70 minutes or so.
Wow, 70 minutes, huh?
And I'll have to cut it back to about 60, but you know.
Easy to do.
Okay.
Thank you, Forrest, and thank you for everything you've done, not only for the Blues, but for WRFG and helping raise my visibility with the listeners that have always been with us here for almost 30 years at WRFG.
It's been my pleasure. You have a great afternoon, my friend. I'll see you next time down the Blues Highway.
All right, man. Be good.
You too, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.